Hello, welcome to the Horror Stories channel. Now I will share with you a terrifying story about the House of Mirrors. The House of Mirrors is a creepy true story about an abandoned mansion in Cadiz, Spain, that is said to be haunted by the ghost of a girl who was murdered by her own mother. There is a house in the old part of the Spanish city of Cadiz that is known as the House of Mirrors. It is an imposing and elegant three-story house with architecture that evokes a Spanish past. This innocent facade fools no one, because anybody in Cadiz who believes in ghosts and knows the mansion's history always steers well clear of the place at night. Legend has it that, years ago, an important admiral in the Spanish Navy lived in the house with his wife and young daughter. The admiral's job meant that he was often away from home for long periods of time as his ship traveled from port to port. His journeys took him to many different and exotic foreign countries. They say the admiral loved and cherished his beautiful daughter more than life itself. Whenever he left, his daughter would wave goodbye with tears streaming down her cheeks. She missed him more than anything else in this world. His daughter collected mirrors, and so, as a token of his deep affection for her, each time he returned from one of his trips, he would bring her back a new mirror as a present. As the years passed, the house became filled with more and more ornate and exquisite mirrors. The girl enjoyed walking around her home and being able to gaze at her own reflection in each mirror. Her father often boasted to his friends and colleagues that his daughter was the most beautiful girl in Cadiz. Over the years, the admiral's wife had grown old and lost her looks. She hated having to see herself in the mirrors and became very jealous of her beautiful daughter. Gradually, the woman sank into the depths of depression, and her resentment towards her own daughter increased in its intensity. The arguments and fights between mother and daughter became more and more frequent during the periods in which the admiral was away at sea. The relationship between mother and daughter was irretrievably contaminated by the secret hatred that grew in the mother's spiteful heart. She became convinced that her husband loved their daughter more than he did his own wife. Blinded by jealousy, her thoughts grew dark and vengeful. On the day the admiral left on his final trip, his wife took the opportunity to put an awful plan into action. She gave her daughter a poisoned drink. The poor girl drank the poison and suffered for days, bleeding from the mouth and eyes, before she slipped into a coma and died. The mother was convinced that with the daughter out of the way, she and her husband could rekindle their love. The father returned a week later and was met at the front door by his wife. She calmly informed him that their daughter had contracted a horrible disease and died while he was away. Upon hearing the terrible news, the man burst into tears. He was completely devastated and spent the next few days sitting in his daughter's bedroom, head in hands, weeping bitterly. Late one night, as the father was wiping the tears from his eyes, he happened to glance into one of the mirrors that hung on the bedroom wall. What he saw made him tremble with fear. In the mirror stood the ghostly figure of his beloved child. As he watched, a shocking scene unfolded in the mirror. His daughter was sending him a message from beyond. Reflected in the mirror, he saw his wife poisoning a drink and offering it to his daughter. He watched as his daughter lay in bed, blood pouring from her eyes and mouth, screaming out in pain. At her bedside, his wife silently gloated. The sight of his beloved child thrashing about in agony before finally succumbing to the deadly poison was more than the poor man could handle. Stunned and full of anger, having discovered the awful truth, the admiral ran downstairs and grabbed his wife by the arms. He forced her to confess to the crime, and then marched her down to the local police station and turned her in. The woman was put on trial for the murder of her daughter, and sentenced to spend the rest of her days alone behind the bars of a filthy prison cell. However, the father never recovered from the death of his only daughter. He simply could not bear to go on living in the house where she had been so cruelly murdered. Each mirror reminded him of his daughter's beauty, and he was unable to get over the pain of her loss. He left Cadiz and moved far away, in an effort to forget his past. The house lay abandoned for decades, its walls still covered with mirrors. People who lived nearby claimed that, late at night, they could hear screams echoing around the old building. They said that it sounded like a young girl crying out in pain. Some brave souls ventured into the house to investigate the mysterious sounds. The noises seemed to be coming from the top floor. They heard the pitiful weeping and wailing of child splitting the silence of the night. The screams were so strange that they seemed to bounce off the mirrors, as if the sounds were emanating from each one. One curious and careless individual accidentally broke one of the mirrors. They say that when he picked up the fragments and looked at them, they did not reflect his face. Instead, reflected in the mirror, he was horrified to see a dead girl. Her face bore an expression of anger that sent a chill down his spine and made him run, screaming from the house. Others who visited the house claimed that they caught a glimpse, out of the corner of their eye, of a girl watching them from inside the mirrors. Upon seeing this, some fled the house in terror, counting themselves lucky to have escaped with their lives. As the years passed, the history of the House of Mirrors, and what had happened there began to spread from Cadiz to the rest of Mexico. The legend became so famous that many teenagers came from far and wide to explore the old, dilapidated building at night. Most of them wanted to either demonstrate their courage, or investigate whether it was possible to look in the mirrors, and catch a fleeting glimpse of the murdered girl. A few years ago, some young people began organizing trips to the old place. They held a contest to see who would dare to stay the longest inside the haunted mansion. They say that once you spend a few minutes inside the House of Mirrors, you won't dare to enter a second time. Creepy, isn't it? If you like this story, and if you are not afraid to hear even more scary stories, go to the channel and watch with pleasure, and also do not forget to subscribe, put likes and click on the bell, to learn about the latest stories first.